ensure safe transit through the Strait of Hormuz, but it's also about the journey of India-Iran relations.
Thank you very much for having me on the show. You're very right. I think India's ties with Iran are, of course, civilizational. They are ancient, they're historical. In addition to the fact that we have many projects of connectivity through Chabahar, the International North-South Transport Corridor. Notwithstanding the fact that India stopped buying oil from Iran in 2019, when during Mr. Trump's first tenure, he had put sanctions on. Iranian oil. So we had stopped at that time taking oil from there, but our relationship with Iran has stayed very strong. As we know, even after this conflict started, the United States and Israel attacked Iran on the 28th of February. So our foreign minister has spoken to his counterpart 4 times during this period. And Prime Minister Modi has also spoken to Mr. Pezeshkian, Mahmoud Pezeshkian, the president of the Iranian Islamic Republic. So our relations are very strong, and I think this is a measure, this is a tribute to the understanding and to the strong relations. That having been said, allow me also to say
Mm-hmm.
that India's relations with all the Gulf countries and the leaders are also very robust, very dynamic, and very deep rooted.
Mm.
And so also our relations with Israel, as we know that Prime Minister Modi was in Tel Aviv just a few days before this war started, before the conflict started. And of course, India's relations with the United States are also written as a comprehensive global strategic partnership that we have with the United States. So India straddles across many divides between Israel and Iran, between Iran and the Gulf, between Iran and the United States.
Mm.
And, this is the policy of multi alignment. This is the strategic autonomy policy that India pursues, India follows with good effect for the benefit and interest of its own people.
Mm.
And of course, to promote security and peace and stability.
Right. I want to bring in Miss Claire as well into the discussion. Now, Miss Claire, this happens at a time when Donald Trump's request to other nations who are heavily dependent on the Strait of Hormuz to secure it, to help, it reopen, seems to have fallen on deaf ears. This is a big diplomatic win as far as India-Iran relations are concerned. How do you see it?
Well, thank you for having me. President Trump's request is for the benefit of the nations who use the strait. So whether they take him up on the invitation or not, doesn't really have any effect on our operations. As President Trump said, we're going to be continuing our operations until we feel the job is done. And as far as India, I think that America is always happy to see India, get everything that it needs, its energy needs met. And that's why President Trump extended the offer as well to waive the sanctions for a period of 30 days. And so India has availed itself of, multiple ways to fulfill its energy needs. And I think the United States is always happy to see that.
Well, that is also because India is diversifying. And let me draw your attention to what Mr. Abbas Arakchi said earlier when, asked about the situation at the Strait of Hormuz. He said that the restrictions are only for enemies and their allies. Everyone else can pass freely.
Right. Well, the Iranian regime, it's hard to take anything they say seriously. And I'm glad that the relations are working out for India, but as we go forward, there might be changes. It's just a note of caution to say that the Iranian regime is really struggling at this moment to communicate within its own ranks and between its own factions. I think the United States, as far as what we're reading from these type of statements that are coming out, is that, we're focused on just degrading their military abilities, moving forward with our operation, and we're seeing successes on that front. And this regime, we haven't decided if we're going to continue dealing with them or not. President Trump said recently on Air Force One that they have reached out for talks, but he doesn't feel that now is the right time for talks. So, and I think that's partly because, it's also a question of who do you talk to, and is that person, can we take what that person is saying seriously? Does that person even have control over some of these elements of the IRGC?
Coming from Donald Trump should be trusted. That keeps on changing. He said that Iran wants to talk, but he does not like the deal, so he's not going to talk to Iran yet. He then went on to say he might just continue the strikes for fun as far as the Karg Island is concerned. Meanwhile, Iran has completely rejected that claim. Iran says we are not going to talk. We are going to continue the fight.
Yeah, well, like I said, Iran says a lot of things, and then in terms of what their actual capabilities are, the United States is very aware of what their limited capabilities are at this point. So I think we're taking a lot of what is coming out of the leadership and the public statements with a grain of salt. And you saw President Trump also making the comment about some of the AI usage and the propaganda coming out of the Iranian regime. So all of that, there's a lot of layers to all of these communications. And I think that the United States is very well positioned right now to understand what exactly is going on with Iran in regard to their power and their ability to actually follow through on some of these statements. And so we're the ones operating on the ground there, or in the air, I guess you could say. So I feel like the United States, if we're saying that we're not taking that seriously, it's probably because we know.
To put an end to this conflict in about a week's time or something, it would have been behind us. But the sort of damage that this conflict is doing to the global economy and countries which are not involved in it at all, like even the Gulf states, they said it's not our war. It is a war of choice by the United States, by Israel, and many people have even gone to suggest that it is a war of hubris, that it is in arrogance that this is being done. But, and even the use of words, Swati, as you also just now mentioned, use of words like that we will carry forward this war for fun. It doesn't send out the right message that the leader of the most powerful nation in the world is talking in such loose, callous, casual terms about war in which people are dying. Meaning, we've seen that, 160 girls died. How many people have died? How many children have died? One cannot be callous about this. And, also using words like, we are doing it for excursion or something. That sounds very, very unserious. And of course, if you talk about that, America knew what it was doing. I don't think America thought that Iran would be able to dig in its heels in such a manner and to push back against the United States and Israel. I'm sure United States did not know that the Strait of Hormuz is going to be closed. It's 47 years since the Islamic Republic came into being. They have faced many conflicts, 1979 to 1989 with Iraq and all those other things. They never closed the Strait of Hormuz.
Right.
Also, the fact that they will be hitting out at the Gulf states. So, but the point, coming to your point, you're very right. Everyone will be, looking out for themselves because, these are big countries. Their survival is on their reliance on the oil and gas coming out of this region is huge. So 20% of the global oil and gas coming out to the other countries, and countries like Japan and South Korea, India, hugely dependent upon these supplies. So obviously they'll have to reach out, and I think they have already started doing so.
Ms. Claire, you earlier said that US wants to help those countries that are heavily invested as well as dependent on the Strait of Hormuz for their energy needs. But, Donald Trump is not just talking about those countries. Donald Trump is also telling NATO that if you do not help, if allies fail to help US in Iran, then it's going to be a very bad future for NATO. But look at the response that is coming in lukewarm, I would say, as far as the NATO countries are concerned.
Well, and when President Trump says we're going to remember, I think that is a comment about, again, about wanting to help NATO, that we want to see NATO and especially some of these NATO countries, take on a little bit more responsibility, take on a little bit more of leadership roles in terms of securing their own needs, securing their own areas, hemispheres, etc. And President Trump has always encouraged them to do that. So I think it's really, even the way he says it is not always in the most diplomatic way, of course. But the point is that he really does want to strengthen NATO, and that's being reflected here again.
May not be, in the most diplomatic way, but some of the words chosen by him, a little excursion or just for fun, it definitely sends out a very wrong message. And like I said, look at the responses coming in from the allies. UK says we do not want to be involved in this.
Yeah, I think that what we're seeing from some of the Europeans, um, I think that what we saw that they designated the IRGC as a foreign terrorist organization only recently. So it really takes them a lot of time, it seems, to catch up with the facts on the ground. And so I think that what we're seeing from them is very expected, probably from the US side. But I also think there's room for people to change their minds. I think there is probably people who haven't outright rejected the offer yet. So we're kind of still waiting to see how everybody's responses come in. And you never know, when the first person joins on, it could change the whole tide for other people joining on as well. So I think it's a very fluid situation right now as well with that.
Okay, the situation is volatile, it's fluid as well. But Ms. Claire, let me, go back to the question of tariffs and waivers. In between tariffs and waivers, the goal that was set by United States of America was to stop Russia from, using all this money by selling its oil. US said that this is funding Russia's war against Ukraine. You want to stop that. That's why Donald Trump came up with tariffs. Now you're giving waivers. So Russia continues to sell oil more, in fact, in these times of need and crisis. A lot of contradictions were pointed out as well, that US continues to do trade and that doesn't fuel this war against Ukraine. So what has US really achieved?
Well, with the Russia question, I have two things. The first thing is that this is a national security action on behalf of the United States. This is about protecting American lives. So that is first and foremost, and we can't consider what may or may not benefit Russia when it comes to that. President Trump's, passionate about peace. He cares very much about it. But American security comes first for him. And the second thing is that I think President Trump sees through the end of this conflict, and he sees what could change and how this whole global energy market could shift with this Iranian regime once they do not have a rogue terrorist regime controlling 20% of the world's oil traffic. And that may not work out very well for Russia. We'll have to see how it all plays out. But I think that President Trump always has in mind second order effects. And so there may be something coming down the line on that.
Okay, I want to bring in Mrs. Sajjanhar. When you say that Donald Trump, and rather when Ms. Claire says that Donald Trump is more concerned about saving American lives, it's all also laced with a lot of contradictions where you continue to do trade with Russia. You want to stop everyone else from doing that. And look at the situation right now. The absolute control of US describes a terrorist regime's absolute control on the Strait of Hormuz. That regime says there are restrictions only on America and its allies. Rest, everybody can pass through freely. And a result of diplomacy, dialogue, and that statement, that stand that has been taken by the Iranian regime, we can see the result of all of that. Shivalik has entered Mundra port. It's on Indian waters.
No, absolutely. Shivalik has come. Nanda Devi is on its way. It'll go to Kandla and, others. What I understand is that, the other 22 ships and tankers that are there in the Persian Gulf, they also slowly, gradually will start finding their way. This is what has been informed to them. And, Swati, you very rightly said, referred to, what Ms. Claire has mentioned, that, attempt to save American lives. But Americans are nowhere on the scene, neither as far as Ukraine is concerned. The people are not there. They are not there as far as fighting Iran is concerned. Meaning they have, I agree, they have lost six, seven people, and that is always, losing even one person is not, is heartrending. But most of the people who are dying are Iranians. There are about 1,900, 2,000 people who have been killed. People who have been killed are Gulf states in terms of the infrastructure that has been destroyed, whether it is the hotels, whether it's residential complexes, whether it's pipelines, whether it's airports or refineries. It's in the Gulf states. It is Israel who has lost people and infrastructure has been destroyed. In fact, American lives, since that was what was mentioned, there are, you can count them on fingertips. But the point is that if this war had not gone through, if it had not started, because negotiations were going on, the mediator, that is Oman, the foreign minister there said that he was very hopeful that we would be able to come to some sort of an agreement. But then I think for their own calculation, Mr. Trump must have thought Iran is at its weakest. That is what he thought. They will not be, they will just crumble once their top leadership, military leadership, and spiritual, religious leadership is decimated, that they will not have the capacity to stay on and fight. But that has not been the case. They have dug in their heels, and in fact, they have expanded the scope of this conflict, going much further, even attacking Turkey, Azerbaijan, and so many other countries. And Mr. Trump has been forced even to invite China to come in and try to help. But of course, so far we have seen that there has been no positive or encouraging, enthusiastic response coming from anywhere. So this has really descended into a war of attrition, which possibly Mr. Trump never wanted. His support base, the MAGA base, does not want that United States should get involved in another non-ending wars, never-ending wars. And we've seen, when wars start, individuals can commence, can begin them. We had thought that even as far as the Russia-Ukraine conflict, Russia is so powerful, second largest, second most powerful military in the world. Within 10 days or 2 weeks, they'll be able to sort of, occupy, have a regime change in Ukraine. And you see, it's 4 years plus, and nothing has happened. Even in Gaza against Hamas, Israel has been able to decimate them, but there's still pockets of resistance still continue to be there. So I think what India has been proposing, talk, dialogue, diplomacy, verify the commitments, have evidence of what they are doing, because war is not, and killing people is not a solution for anything. And, we can't have uniformity all over,
Okay.
that everyone will do and think as we think. If they don't, then we are going to come and, obliterate them and decapitate them and all that.
All right.
Talk and try to get, some sort of an agreement at some level or the other.
All right. I request both our guests to stay on with us. Our visuals coming in from Mundra Port, where the process of docking currently is underway. And it's a much needed relief, respite in terms of the LPG crisis that we are witnessing. Earlier in the Interior Ministry press conference also, it was confirmed that the situation is worrying, where it's not like the agencies are out of LPG cylinders. Okay, let me go back to our guests and let's continue the discussion. Ms. Claire, what do you have to say about this observation that, United States assessment of Iran, or the duration for which perhaps US had planned to continue the strikes, has gone wrong, that it has failed, because this little excursion is turning out to be a bigger excursion. It's taking time. It's not a quick victory, as many, of course, imagined.
Well, I think that there, I would disagree with the assessment and with the premise that the United States is surprised by the duration. I think that the United States has very well planned out this conflict. They planned and prepared for all of the Iranian retaliation that we're seeing. There's multiple accounts and reports from independent military analysts as well as the Department of War who say that they knew Iran was going to try to close the Strait of Hormuz. That was factored into all of their plans, as well as all the other things that Iran has done. Of course, war is unpredictable, and so, there are times where the military has had to adapt, and you've heard statements from the Department of War on how they've done that as well. But the overall picture is that they're actually ahead of schedule in terms of meeting their military operational goals. Now, when it comes to the regime change and the political side about, are we going to continue to work with this regime, or are we going to see if there's going to be another regime that comes in, and are we going to be politically supporting a transitional government, things like that. That might take a little bit of time. And I think right now you're seeing that's what President Trump said, is he's assessing whether or not this regime is somebody that we can work with. And right now he feels that they are not.
But hasn't Iran responded? Because Donald Trump earlier also wanted a say in choosing the next supreme leader of Iran. And Iran has already responded by choosing Mojtaba Khamenei, making it absolutely clear that there is going to be no change of regime. I mean, that's the indication that has come in from Iran.
Well, that's what Iran says. And, President Trump and Israel is involved in this as well. So there's multiple factors to consider. But Israel has said that they are going to keep on going after the regime infrastructure and regime leadership. President Trump, has said that he may support Israel in doing that, because if we assess that these leadership are continuing to threaten Americans, which is the point of this whole operation, then those people are considered enemy combatants and they may be eliminated. That's not to say that, we're just going to keep on eliminating everybody until we find somebody perfect. I don't think anybody's expecting that will happen, but President Trump is looking for someone that he can negotiate with, and somebody who is, going to be reasonable, especially on the nuclear issue. And if he's not seeing that, then the same threat is still there and the operation's going to continue.
So which means, again, then the questions arise on the assessment, the initial assessments made by United States of America, Mr. Sajjan. This is not a little excursion. It is not going to end anytime soon. Also, is Donald Trump looking for a Venezuelan model? Because